And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 194. Today we're going to be looking at the idea of observational exercise, trying to learn how to see with your camera. And with that, I'm going to be showing you Instagram accounts and playing around with that kind of thing. So stick around for that. Also going to chat about one or two things that have been sent in as well. On top of that, if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment, let me know you're here, and we'll make a start. So yes, welcome, episode 194. God, that means only 6 more, we'll reach the number 200. Maybe I'll have to think of something special for that. If you have any ideas, let me know. Meanwhile, here we are, yes, live on YouTube. Unless you happen to, of course, be watching the recordings, in which case we have 193 other episodes you can go and tap into at any time. Meanwhile, make sure you, if you want to subscribe, click the like button as well. YouTube always likes the like button in the algorithms. But as I say, if you do happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know where you are. Let me know what the weather's like. Let me know if you actually managed to get any of those aurora photos that have been absolutely flooding my Facebook feed for the last day or two. All this kind of stuff. And I can see we've got a couple of comments already. Robert from Texas says, howdy all from a cloudy North Texas. Susan says, hello from a very warm and occasionally sunny Kirkcudbright. Believe me, 21 degrees C is warm in Scotland. And it is indeed. It has kind of felt almost like a heat wave, whereas I know VG in India would be complaining about the bitter cold at this kind of temperature. April says, greeting all from a gloomy day in Long Island, New York, and happy Mother's Day. Oh, of course, it's Mother's Day for North America and other parts of the world. Here in the UK, that was back in March, I think. So anyway, happy Mother's Day to all those not in the UK who happen to be celebrating it today. What else have we got? John says, good day all from Columbus, Ohio. Had another week of tornadoes. Wow. Tornado hunting. It's just something you don't get in the UK. Is that something you've ever gone kind of looking to get a photo of, John? Do let us know. Janet says, hello from a warm Mississauga with a sunny cloud mix. April says, what is 21 degrees in Fahrenheit? About 70-ish, I think, give or take. Oh, Susan says 69.8 degrees. Right. Janet says 59. You're missing out a little bit somewhere along there. No, 21 is 69 to 70 basically with the Fahrenheit. Janet says she typed it wrong. Janet also says she tried for the aurora photos. Just transferring to computer now. Not sure if they came out. Oh, Marilyn joins us, says good morning from Colorado. And Meg says, hello, everyone. So yeah, for those who are in the Northern Hemisphere, apparently, or higher, further up in the northern parts of the Northern Hemisphere, apparently the aurora was particularly strong, not last night, but the night before. People I know who've never seen the aurora before were saying that this is the first time they'd ever actually seen it. It wasn't just a case of you had to have a long exposure thing on the camera. Is there something faint? Oh, you don't see the colours until you get it. People are actually seeing it from with the naked eye. Unfortunately, I managed to miss it. Last night I thought, if it does it again, I'll go out. But of course, needless to say, it didn't. I'll have to hang around for that next once in a generation. But who knows? I'm sure some people will have some great photos. Robert's giving double Celsius and add 32. It's not quite, so we're still on the conversion bit here. It's times by 9 divide by 5. Actually, plus 32 is the way to do it. Times by 9 divide by 5 plus 32. The double and add 32 is a bit more of an approximate. Oh no, John said he doesn't do tornado photography, a bit too dangerous. Well, Sandra's joined us from a hot and sunny Birmingham. Right, okay, what are we going to do then? So what I'm going to talk about today is the notion of observational exercises. And by that, what I mean is, I'm sure every one of you has ever held a camera and done any kind of watching things online or, read any bits of advice. And sooner or later, somebody turns around and says, just always have your camera with you because you never know what's going to happen. And the problem is when we've got some great big bulky thing like this, it's not always easy to always have it on you. And of course, we also know the number of times that we've been out and about and something's happened and we haven't had our camera with us. So, but we do live in a day of mobile phones. Mobile phones, which are, or cell phones for you across the pond, are getting so much more sophisticated with their technology. It's unbelievable. We've kind of crossed on this matter before now, but these things here, especially if you've got one which was sort of made in the last couple of years, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a Samsung, whether it's a Google Pixel, which is what this one is, it's quite phenomenal what you can get out of them. And the thing is with this is you also tend to pretty much always have it on you as well. Now, what I really want to talk about here is the idea of getting into a habit of using your phone when you're out for a walk. Over the course of the last 4 years and a bit, I've discussed all sorts of compositional techniques, things about understanding lighting and all these different kind of and technicals and all sorts of things on to do with photography. Primarily, the thing that I keep coming back to, the core of any good photo, is narrative. A narrative doesn't have to be some great long War and Peace level exposition. Narrative is the idea of essentially what's the photo about? What are you trying to convey? What was it in that moment that caused you to lift your camera and go, that looks interesting? And if I could capture that, what would I want to show other people? Is it that bit of texture I find particularly interesting? Is it that colour? Is that colour clash? Is it those lines? Is it something to do with the content? But it's not always just usually to do with the content. Sometimes it's to do with the way that content sits in conjunction with something else. And so the narrative is essentially that story, that mood, that feel that we want to try and convey in an image. And then, to help convey that image, we have a whole wide range of tools available to us. From the technical settings on your camera, your aperture, your ISO, your shutter speed, through to lighting techniques and understanding backlight, side light, front light, reflected light, combinations of light, through to compositional techniques like rule of thirds, symmetry, asymmetry, colour balance, colour clash, echoes, leading lines, use of diagonals, all these kind of things. Now, all these kind of things we've talked about at different times, and we will talk about them again as well. They are all tools that we can use to get more interesting photos. But in order to get the interesting photos, knowing all this lot, all these things, learning all these things, are no good in and of themselves unless you use them. And knowing when to use which one or which combination of these tools comes with skill and practice. Now, what I'm going to talk you through here now, because what I've recently done is I've set up a second Instagram account. In fact, actually what I've done is I've taken an old second Instagram account that I stopped using 5 or 6 years ago. I set it up, used it for a couple of months, and then stopped using it. But it's different to my normal Ayres photography Instagram account. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you both accounts, and I'm going to talk about how I use each one and why I'm using it differently, or how I'm using them differently. And also in this, what I'm hoping to do is inspire you to, if you've already got an Instagram account, perhaps use that one or set up a second one. But I want to try and inspire you to start really using your camera, or very least your phone, on a near daily basis if you can, going out for walks. I'm going to talk you through all that. So again, if we have questions, pop them into the feed. If you have observations, if you want to share something, keep the chat going. Any more conversations Robert said maths is not my strong point. April says, John, Florida has good water spouts that are safer to photograph. Okay, cool. So little bits of chat going on there. So what am I getting? Where do I go then? Okay, let's talk then about this notion of okay, let's go to the Instagram account. So we've got, that, sitting up, sitting up here, every week you see my Ayres photography at Instagram. But over here we've got my proper, this is what my Kim Ayres photography Instagram account actually looks like. And I've got 3 pictures pinned at the top, because on Instagram you can pin 3 images. So I've pinned, a couple of my greatest hits as such, my most popular ones, and one that I've got a particular love for at the moment. What else have I got on here? Well, actually, I've got photos of Meg, but there was an idea with this one. Some of you saw the black. This one said black or white. Which do you prefer? And so I've been out with Meg. We've been sitting having a coffee. This was a black and white version. This was a colour version. I was asking for feedback to see what other people thought, and I got a reasonable response with that. You can see here the shadows challenge. Selfie with my father when I went down to visit him a little while ago. Black and white photo of Meg, more my headshot. These ones here are where I've been doing photo shoots, and this is quick selfie with the clients. Likewise, another photo shoot here, quick selfie with the clients. Another photo shoot here. There was a mirror on the table. I was leaning over the shoulder of this artist to sort of take a shot of her from above. Took a quick glance across, took a photo of me. Now, these kind of things, these sort of, that was about Down Syndrome Day, exhibition going on. Now, these kind of photos, these sort of selfie type photos, same with this little one here, are useful for saying these were shoots that I was involved in. So in essence, I've got, and then what I've also got is I've got things like the Shadows Challenge and promote the podcast. So in essence, what happens is my primary Instagram account is about 3 things. There's the big fancy photo shoots that I do where I'm showing off what I am capable of. This is me as a photographer, which is trying to do my best to impress you as a photographer so that you might commission me to do work for you, okay? Then there's the podcast stuff. Remind people that I do a podcast, because there's plenty of people who follow my Instagram account who will never commission me for work because they're amateur or enthusiastic photographers. But these people, hopefully I steer towards the podcast. And then there's essentially the selfies with family, the cups of coffee with Meg, the meeting up with my dad, and or the selfies with the clients. And what these things do are the human aspect. These are the show you that it's not just pictures I put up, but I'm a real person behind the camera. There's an important aspect of this. One of the things I've always noticed is these selfies always get considerably more likes than my actual work, which is, sometimes, I put up what I consider to be one of my greatest photos ever, and I get 20 likes. I do a quick selfie with me and Meg having a cup of hot chocolate somewhere, and suddenly I'm getting 120. But it is an important part of social media that the social side kind of comes into it. So this kind of brings me back to the second Instagram account I set up. If we go back half a dozen years, I wasn't quite so aware of the importance of actually peppering my website, my Instagram site, with the kind of selfie thing. It's not all selfies, but there's a few of them go on. At the time, I thought what I had to do was just put up finished work, and that's all it was. At that point, there wasn't any podcasts, so I was only putting up finished work. Again, if we just flick back here a sec, if we scroll further down, we'll tend to find that there's much more in the way of, completed images, full photo shoots, and they're quite often linking to blog posts. Yeah, still getting the odd selfie in here and there. Mostly, though, it was photo shoots. And as we go further back down, we'll find more and more in the way of photo shoots and less in the way of social, the kind of selfie type things. That kind of changed my understanding with Instagram, that actually I still needed to promote the fact that I was a real person on the other side of the camera. But if we go back to 6 years, I decided to set up a separate photo, basically to stick the selfies on. I started using I got a slightly better phone. I started taking a couple of photos of doing things like selfies or that's a nice sky. And it's not really the kind of stuff that I was necessarily promoting at the time about me, but I just wanted to be able to have a place I could put quick snaps. And the problem is for the most part, I couldn't put quick snaps on my main account because that would then dilute what I was doing. Are you with me? Okay, where am I going with this? One of the things I do a lot is when I'm out for a walk, I go out for a walk most days, I have my phone with me, and what I try and do is look, just seeing what's interesting. And it might be texture, it might be some kind of brickwork or peeling paint, it might be lines that grab my attention, it might be colours, it might be, but at the moment, overwhelmed with the amount of new blossom coming up and growth and spring and everything else. So there's loads to photograph. Now these photos of things like cherry blossom or broom flowers or cracks in the pavement or whatever aren't the kind of thing that I would put on my main Instagram account, because that's not what I'm selling. My main Instagram account is really about business. It's about me trying to promote the fact that I am a professional photographer, albeit one who has a daughter that I go out and have cups of coffee with, who occasionally meets up with his dad and has a selfie. But it's there to promote my professional photography. But these observational exercises, which is going out with your phone, just being aware when you're around you, suddenly going, I really like the way that branch is overhanging and silhouetted against that particular texture in the sky, for example. This is part of what trains your eye. Okay, now, so I take a whole bunch of photos like this, and I have been for years, but they never go anywhere. They've just been sitting in folders on my computer. Because occasionally I put things up on my own Facebook page, my personal Facebook page. Quite often I've changed the banner and put up some kind of picture of a bee on a flower or something like that, because I don't feel it's particularly harming my image as such. But I think it's important to do this, and I wanted to have a place to put these images. So very, very recently I suddenly remembered I actually had another account. This one is called Ayres Phone Pics. Okay, so actually, if I tell you what, I'll just copy that, and if you want, I will paste this into instagram.com/Ayres Phone Pics. Okay, so I've just pasted that into the comments if you're interested. Now, you don't have to look now, don't click on it just now, you can go and click on it later. But it's there if you want. And in fact, oh, not that one. Let me go back to here. And so this one, like I say, I started off initially, here's a couple of old photos. It was selfie time, me and my wife, Maggie's favourite picture of the two of us. Another selfie another time, it was one of my favourite ones of the two of us. Down on the beach, that's at Anmouth. This one also over in Northumberland. And that's kind of as far as I got. I had a few other things which I've since removed. But very recently, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to start using this one. Now, this, for example, let me talk you through some of these pictures. This picture is a tree towards the end of Castle Douglas. You're heading out the north end of Castle Douglas. Over on the right, in the fields, is this tree. And the thing is with this tree is every time I walk past it, it's a bit different. Even through the winter, when there's no leaves on it, the weather's different, the clouds are different. So I will just nip across the road, lean over the wall with my phone and take another shot of it. And so when I decided to reboot this Ayres Phone Pics site, I put a bunch of them together, 4 or 5 photos, where there's a different kind of sky and light each time. Okay, so that was kind of where I started with this. I thought, well, okay, let's start. So that's something you can do. In terms of observational exercise, is there a particular place you can go to where it's constantly changing because of the light, because of the seasons, because of something else going on? Maybe there's a building site, maybe it's a tree or plant, something that gets weathered. But whether the light's changing, or there's changing growth, or there's changing construction, or there's changing because of human intervention, that becomes something that you can use as a technique. And then periodically you might want to kind of keep revisiting that. So actually, if I go back up here, here's another one. This is one I did put up a couple of days ago of the same tree, only now the leaves have come out. Okay, so at some point in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably put up another one of these where the leaves are thicker and greener, or maybe the clouds have changed again. The key thing about this is that these photos aren't for anybody else. Okay, these photos are for me. These photos are a sketchbook in a way. They're like doing little thumbnail sketches. They're like tasters, reminders that they are observational exercise. My little tags up here, the ones that go into all of them, are observational exercise, Google Pixel 7, because that's the phone I'm using on this, in this case Castle Douglas, and then I've got Oak Tree Field Spring Growth Leaves. Okay, but Castle Douglas, if it's taken in this town, observational exercise and Google Pixel 7 are the ones that basically get repeated every time. And this is an important thing that I want to try and get across, really, is this idea that you can take your phone and use it to practice. These pictures of trees and bits of texture, I'll show you some more in a minute, but they're not about me trying to create an image which I'm going to be putting into a camera club, printing up, trying to sell, or anything like that. They are exercises, because for me, the way I make my money is through commissions to do portraits and narrative photography for businesses and for families and clients. You know, it's a client commission basis. But I still need to practice my photography. I still need to keep going with my photography. I still need to hone my photography. And every single time I see something and I go, oh, is that a bit more interesting if I have it a slightly different angle? Oh, look at that line there. Oh, look at the way the light is going. Oh, look at that color clash there. It's feeding into, it's practice, it's honing my skills so that at the point that I'm maybe in a fancy studio or I'm in an amazing location and I've got people and I've got outfits and everything else, my brain is already primed to look for interesting lines, colors, compositional techniques and all the rest of it. Now, what the phone doesn't do, I've not got a manual setting on this, so I'm not practicing my shutter speed, aperture or ISO. I don't have external lighting sources, flashes, so I'm not practicing that. But I am practicing my compositional techniques. Composition, rule of thirds, diagonals, leading lines, colours, all these kind of things I can practice when I'm out. And they all feed into my growth as a photographer, my understanding of photography. Susan said here, I did a similar thing to Kim. I set myself a challenge last year to take a photo from my front door every morning for a year. I'm lucky to have lovely views with a rather grand house. Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, there's that idea of a single view, like the tree, or a single place. I mean, if you've got a front door and you've got a bit of a view, then you can kind of take... There are a couple of photographers local to the region called Leeming and Patterson, Ted Leeming and Morag Patterson. And they've got an amazing house up in the hills with this fantastic view. But they decided to do a year, it might have even been more than a year, could have even been partly over lockdown, I can't remember, but maybe 2 or 3 years, where essentially they just did a whole set of photos purely from that sort of front porch in all these different weather conditions. And then he made a book out of it. And it's quite an amazing book. I've got a copy of it. So that idea of setting yourself what does this thing look like and how does it change and how many different ways can I see it? My thing of going for a walk, most of the time I'm doing the same loop around the town. I'm walking up here, I'm going down that street, I'm cutting down that little path, I'm walking past that bit of the park, I'm coming by these trees, I'm circling around, I walk along that top of that little bit of wall, cross the park and come home again. So there's an exercise then in how, even though it's ever so familiar, I've been walking this around here for 15, 20 years, can I see something different each time I'm out? And the fact that I've primed my eyes to do so is what makes the exercise, is to stop filtering out the world, but learn to look at it fresh. Let's show you a couple more photos to show you what I mean. So trees. come back here. Where were we? Okay, leaf opening. So this one here, just again, I was walking along the edge of the bit of parkland. The sun's coming through, it's hitting these new bits of leaves that are kind of coming out, and they just grabbed me, and I thought, can I do something? So I pull the phone out, move it around, take a photo, and the great thing about the phone, you can see instantly, you've got a nice screen, and I could click, zoom in a bit, pull out a bit, try 2 or 3 different versions until I feel, right, I've got something there, and then just plonk the thing back in my pocket, and away I go. Okay, it's not hard work, it's not intense labour, because I'm not trying to create the perfect photo. What I'm trying to do here is just grab something which I feel is a little bit interesting. A few days later, back around the same place, these leaves have now unfurled a bit further. And again, because of the time of day I was walking, there's backlight coming through these leaves, creating kind of these rather wonderful colours. Cherry blossom. You know, just that, well, while that was out, it's all kind of disappearing now. But, you know, a couple of weeks ago, the cherry blossom was out, we got starting to come out, got this fantastic, again, backlight coming down, the white here, the pink there, but that backlight of the sun, using that to actually get this kind of glow going. Compare that to, again, a week or so later, cherry blossoms now falling onto the road, filling up in the kind of gutters and what have you. And at this point, this is one of those ground level ones. The great thing about the phone is I can literally I can get the phone down lower to the ground than I can get my head, really. And so I'm able to lower the phone down right into the cherry blossom that's here. And then, as well as getting this streak of pink, I'm trying to catch the curb. So the edge of the curb then is, we've got these lovely diagonals kind of shifting up. So this kind of whole perspective shot that comes from the cherry blossom. Now, I also have another photo of this where I'm just looking straight down at the cherry blossom, and you've got paving, cherry blossom, road. So like 3 stripes. But for this one, I decided what I wanted to do was also get the angle one. And when I looked at the photos, this was the one I preferred. So this is the one that went up online. Here, in this region, there's various sort of tower houses, old castles and what have you. I was with a friend. We went out to a place called Drumcoltron Tower. And you've got this fantastic old stone staircase going around. And again, just a very quick thing. I'm there and I can see the lines. Those lines are beautiful, and the light's kind of coming in and it's hitting the steps. And I thought, suddenly remembered, I've got my phone, pull out my phone, take a nice little kind of elongated thing where it's warping slightly, but we're getting the curve down, we're getting the light. Okay, it's observation, it's remembering to do it. Recently, there's a supermarket in Castle Douglas called Tesco, which has just been through a renovation of the car park. Different sections of the car park have been sort of shut off for a while they've been resurfacing it. And so there's been diggers and equipment kind of sitting there. This one was shot one evening when I was walking past Tesco's, and it was all parked up. There was wire fencing in front, but again, the great thing about this, the actual camera lens is only this big, so I can just slot it between the wires of the fencing. And then I decided to go for a very symmetrical, straight on to the digger. In this case, there's a bit of light coming down from the street lamp up here. A couple of little echoes of yellow with the machinery in the background. And I'm so seeing what I can kind of create. Now, a couple of other ones. This one was done on a different day. You can see a wet day. But what we've got here is we've got the digger. But what I really noticed was I suddenly noticed this digger in the background here. If I got the right angle, I could get it to sit within the arm of this one. Okay, so this essentially becomes frame within a frame. But to do that, I've got to squat down a bit, shift left a bit, shift right a bit, tilt the camera, find the bit again between the wires where I can get that to fit. But the thing is when I was walking past, I noticed the potential for it. I saw that arm coming over and probably saw a bit of the digger in it and went, oh, right, actually, if I get the right angle, So something gets triggered, I spend 30 seconds moving about, take the photo, move on. Similar kind of thing going on here, only now in order to get this digger inside that arm, I've got to get right down at ground level. So again, wonderful thing about the phone, I can just put it down at ground level, tilt it backwards and forwards a little bit, just try and get the right angle, move forward and in and out until I go, okay, I quite like that composition, I quite like the clouds and the blue sky behind it as well. And, sorry, where were we? Wrong one. And then this one, almost identical to the other shot, except that this one's during the day rather than at night. Parked slightly differently, that light is now over on the left, whereas over on the right in the other one. But again, going for that sort of symmetrical, straight-on kind of look between the wires. Other things. This one, it was an interesting one. I was out of the town. It was night time, and there was some kind of antique or junk shop, and the lights were on in the background, and so we're getting this lovely backlight. There's light coming down the stairs, there's light coming from the room behind, little bits of light reflecting in glass, but there's a whole kind of really detailed shot. It's probably not showing up very well on your screen. This is one of those shots which actually you really need to blow up big, and to be honest, would make a fantastic 1,000-piece jigsaw. There's so much detail in it. But at this point, I saw it. I thought, that's really interesting. I pulled the phone out and I just slapped it up against the window, pressed it right up against the window so I wasn't getting the reflection of me into it. And once I've kind of just moved it, slid it up and down the window till I got the height, went, and click, and away you go. So shop windows become interesting. What can you see through the window? What else have we got? We've got broom. Broom are one of my favourite plants at the moment. We've got two kinds of broom in the garden. One of them has broom is generally yellow leaves. We've got a particular strain which has also got yellow and red. I saw a bee flying around. Now, God knows how many bees on flowers I've attempted with my macro lens and wildly missed the mark. Oddly enough, I found it fairly straightforward, again with my phone, to be able to lock on to the bee and shoot off 2 or 3 images, and this one worked out not too bad at all. Now, this image would be no good blown up and printed up. The quality isn't there. But as a on-screen, digital, social media level of thing, it's fine. And again, what else? I've got another one of the broom here, the other kind of broom. Fantastically brilliant blue sky. Realising that the broom, if there was a kind of branch going up, so I just get down, I get under, I angle it around, I make sure that the chimney pots of local houses and another tree that's off to the left aren't getting in the way, wiggle it around till I got the composition. And now this is all about colour, blue and yellow, and also a use of diagonal to make sure that this is sort of running up and running diagonal. This line, this part of the screen here, the picture here is moving up towards the top corner. So again, trying out the composition. How's it going to work? What am I looking for here? I'm looking for the yellow against the blue, but I'm also looking to try and get a sense of diagonal to give it that little bit more energy. Here's another shot of the broom in the evening from a different angle. Now we've got the sunlight, the sun's getting low in the sky, we're into golden hour, and I loved just the glow of these front leaves and the kind of the taking it out of focus into the background where it's just kind of echoing. So different kind of feel and mood to it again. That was the tree again. This one here, I was out doing a photo shoot a couple of days ago at Old Girth Bridge. Now, for those of you who really want to zoom in, there's a tiny little red dot up here. That's the person I was actually doing photos with. Now, I was down on the kind of the edge of the water on these stones here, and I was using my big camera with the big zoom lens, taking a shot up at this woman who was then on the edge of the bridge wearing this brightly coloured dress. But while I was there, I also happened to notice that I loved the way that the light was hitting the water and reflecting on the underside of the bridge, and also these sort of great big pillars of the stone bridge. So I whipped out my phone, quick couple of photos. On the way back from photographing that woman, it was quite late. I stopped off at a chip shop in Dumfries, got Palmerstons for anybody local. Went down to the edge of the River Nith, and this is the Buccleuch Street Bridge, Devonshire Bridge behind it. And again, brilliant blue skies. I was just able to kind of lean out across the water a bit, hold the phone, take some photos, and get this lovely sense of balance of reflections and what have you. So another bridge, completely different kind of angle. This one I just put up this morning is literally textured paint, a little kind of gas mains post or something like that have been painted yellow several times, paint peeling off, and it's just texture. It's just texture and colour. But it was noticeable. It sort of grabbed my attention, so I grabbed it. So this is really what it's about. This is what I'm trying to get across, is the fact that none of these photos am I trying to make up. I'm not trying to make up a big body of work. I'm not trying to take these to print up and sell. I'm not trying to take these to impress people at camera clubs. These are observational exercises. These are things to hone my eye. And I think it's such an important thing to try and do. And like anything, we get better with practice. I mean, you can't expect to pick up a guitar or start playing the piano and instantly be brilliant at it. You practice, you practice, you practice. You practice scales, you practice improvising. And it's the same thing with your camera. You know, I come across people who, they call themselves photographers or, you know, keen amateur photographers, but they've not picked up their camera for 2 weeks. And part of it is convenience. Part of it is because it's just a big heavy thing. You don't, if you're walking up to the shops just to get yourself a pint of milk, you're not going to carry a camera with you. But you do still have your phone with you. What's interesting between here and the shops? What's interesting between the car park and the supermarket? There's always going to be something. There's going to be something with texture. There's going to be something with colour. There's going to be something with line. There's going to be something with shadow. There's going to be something the way the light is falling. There's going to be something. There is always something to look at. And once you start training your brain, once you start learning how to look, and if you do this every day, if you do this every time you go out for a walk, you say, a little mental note, what can I see? Then it changes the way you look. And remember, we've talked about before, and it's never more so true than this, that when we take a photo of something, it's not about what something looks like, it's about what something looks like as a photo, okay? We're not trying to get necessarily that bridge to look like a bridge, we're trying to get that bridge to look interesting as a photograph. Or those pebbles, or that peeling paint, whatever it is. So that's really where I wanted to go with this. Is just to, so what I would suggest with this is, if you haven't done so already, set yourself up an Instagram account. Or if you have an Instagram account that you're already using, which other people know you for because you put up your pictures of your whatever, set up a second one. They're fairly easy to set up. And then use it for observational exercise. It doesn't have to be for anybody else. Purely for you to put up images, to practice and to create something. Now, if you want, you know, I put my put the Kim Ayres phone pics into the Instagram thing. Go and link to that if you want. If you set up your Instagram account, go there, click like. I'll click like back. If you want, we can have a few. You know, we can all link to each other and maybe leave a couple of encouraging comments if you feel like it. You don't have to. But I think it's worth having something which you, particularly you take off the computer, okay? Because we take these photos, we leave them on the phone, or we download them to the computer, they stay on the computer. But I think this is actually another important part of it. You take the photos, and then at the end of the day, pick one. Pick one of the photos that you've taken, or if there's been a nice little sequence, pick 3 of them and string them together in the same post. But if you can stick up a post a day, or if that's too much, just the idea of 3, maybe 4 a week, okay? But have that idea in mind, that a few times a week, ideally every day, but given the fact that there will be some days where it just won't be practical, but whenever you can, stick one of your phone photos up, okay? Because once you take them off the phone, once you take them off the computer, you are aware that somebody else might see them because you are putting them in the public domain. Even if you've only got 2 followers and actually neither of them are bothering to take any notice, there's always the chance somebody might come across them. So it does force you as well to try and think, well, okay, what's my best version of this? And that also helps you curate your own imagery as well. So I think it's really important. Set yourself up an Instagram or equivalent if you prefer Flickr or there's some other thing you want, but somewhere online, have an account somewhere, which isn't about trying to impress anybody else, but it is about you putting up images that you are practicing and constantly honing all your different compositional skills. Then if you run into difficulties with it, it's also a place where you can send these images to me. Don't forget, we have the critique section. Okay, if you're running into problems, send them to me, tell me what your sticking point is, and I'll do my best to help. Okay, let's see, that's really what I hope that all makes sense. So a few comments here. What have we got? April says, nice, you even got some bokeh with the leaf shot. Yeah, one of the things I found just as a point to get the bokeh with this is I don't have a big zoom lens on this, but I can do a zoom thing. I've got 3 auto settings, like a normal, a wide angle, and a sort of just a double, just slight zoom on it. But if I put it into that zoom one, into the double size one, and I put it close up to something, it does tend to blur out the background. So it's a little bit about getting to know your own phone and what it's capable of. Sandra says, I like the first leaf shot with all the bokeh in the background. Stacey says, good morning. Oh, glad you could make it, Stacey. It's catching up, getting breakfast, and it's a rainy day. April says, I like the tractor shot with the sky in it. Oh, laugh out loud. Sometimes I wonder what people think of me when I seem obsessed with my photos. Doesn't matter. Nobody else cares, to be honest. I mean, I was talking with somebody recently. We were out and taking a few photos, and she was saying, oh, I get a bit self-conscious. People are going to be looking at me taking photos, what they'll be thinking. And I said, all they'll be thinking is there's somebody taking their photos. What am I having for dinner tonight? I must tell somebody else about that program I was watching on Netflix. If anybody even notices what we're doing, they've forgotten about us 5 seconds later. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, it's not, as long as we're not actually actively harming anybody or doing anything illegal, then these days we're so used to seeing people whipping out their phones and taking photos, it doesn't matter. So you don't need to feel very self-conscious about it. What else have we got? Susan says, I think I need a new phone. Mine's about 8 years old and I can't change any of the settings. I really would recommend it, to be honest, because you will be astounded at the quality of modern phones. Get something which is, at least 2023 or something like that. You don't necessarily have to buy the brand new latest iPhone, but these things are amazing. April says she loves the macro B shot. Sandra says, I like the shop interior, and the B shot is good for a phone as well. Conversations going on between Stacey and April. Susan says she loves the peeling paint. More conversation between Stacey and April about good places to go if you're on Long Island, New York. And Robert says, I tend not to like the phone photos because Samsung auto processes them. However, I do like the manual mode, very similar to a camera. And that's fine. That's okay. I mean, if you're wanting to, if you want to go in and play with the manual, that's great. Really what I'm talking about here, Robert, with the phone is the idea of it, just the quick instantness of it is that you don't have to sort of feel like you've got to stand there for 10 minutes and adjust everything. This is sketchbook stuff. This is quick stuff. This is take it now because you saw something, and hopefully now if you have the time, then that's great. If sit and play with the manual all you like. If you've got your big camera in the back and it triggers something, bring out your big camera, do all the fancy bits with it. That's not a problem. I would absolutely encourage that. What I'm talking about here really is the problem that sometimes we don't have the big camera with us. Sometimes we don't have the time. We're just out for a walk. We've gone up to the shops to get a pint of milk. We're walking back. We need to get back with that pint of milk. We don't have time to linger for too long. But 30 seconds, we can spare 30 seconds to go, oh, that looks a bit interesting. Whip out the phone, quick shot, change the angle, another quick shot, shift it a bit, quick shot. Yeah, actually, that's quite nice. And that's really what I'm talking about, is that kind of, but it pulls your brain back into this idea of your eye for photography, but with convenience. And that's really what I'm talking about. So, hope that all makes sense. Hope you found that interesting. All right, so where are we going to go now? Oh, yes, a little bit on Smug points. Where were we with Smug points? So, May so far, we Susan is currently leading with 45 Smug points. Andy's second with, Andy and Robert are both second with, joint second with 35 Smug points. VG at 25 and April and Sandra are bringing up, coming up next, 20 apiece. So all to play for on the Smug points leaderboard. For the second quarter top three, Andy's in the lead with 120, Meg and April on a joint 85, and VG and Robert on a joint 80. So that's where we are with the Smug points. Couple more things to come. So at the end of this podcast, I will tell you what's coming up over the next couple of weeks and where you can earn more Smug points as well. Okay, so a couple of things I've had sent in, which I need to address, or I want to address. Well, first of all, Robert, if you're listening and you haven't kind of turned off and gone somewhere else, I did send you a message asking if you wanted me to give some feedback on your skateboarder shot, the full size one. I've got a couple of things I'm happy to suggest about, so if you want to just quickly leave me a yes or a no in the comments now, because you didn't message me back. If you say yes, I can go ahead and give you some feedback on that. If you say no, that's fine, we'll leave it. Now, while I'm waiting for you to respond to that, what I'm going to turn to now is just Janet. Now, I'm not going to have a huge amount to say for Janet. Well, a couple of things here. Let's show you first of all. So this is Janet's photo. And Janet said, this is an old image, so I'm not sure where to find the original file, probably before I started shooting raw. Okay, let's just zoom that in a bit. And she says, any idea how I did this? Here's a photo. Any idea how I took it? I shoot these races fairly regularly from 2007 to 2016 when I moved into an afternoon shift at work, and tried many times to try and get something similar again. I got onto a daytime shift again in 2020, but wasn't able to get to the races again until last year, and only about 3 times, but I'm hoping to go regularly this summer. I know my intention was to practice panning, but this came out different to any of my other panning images. I was on a corner and was starting to lose the light. Okay, so what Janet's photographing cycle races, but rather than using a high shutter speed, which is what we normally do with something that's moving fast, to click to freeze the moment, she's doing panning shots. And panning shots are where you are trying to move the camera with the cyclists. Okay, so normally what would happen is on a slow shutter speed, we'd have a fixed camera to stop it getting blurred, and if the cyclist moves across the camera, the background will be sharp, the cyclist will be blurred if we're on a slow shutter speed. So normally we would have a very high shutter speed to try and freeze the cyclist. But the panning idea is that what you do is as the cyclist goes past, you move the camera with it. And if, and it's a very big if, you manage to move your camera at exactly the same rate that the cyclist is moving, then the cyclist stays in focus, apart from perhaps the legs which were moving up and down, and the background gets smeared, goes out of focus. And it can be a really effective way of capturing that notion of speed. But it is extraordinarily difficult to pull off. It is not an easy one to do. For a start, you need an incredibly steady hand, you need a lot of luck. You also need to have lower light conditions. On a bright sunny day like this, even if I've got my ISO at 100 and I've got my f-stop at 22, there's still so much light coming in that if I go to anything less than 125th of a second, the whole thing's going to white out. So I can't go down to a fifth of a second, a quarter of a second, half a second, 1 second, in order to be able to get the kind of speed, the slow shutter speed, in order to blur the background. Now, the slower the shutter speed, the more blur you're going to get. So if you have to be at a fairly high shutter speed, say a 60th of a second or 20th of a second, you need to have something that's moving fairly fast if you want to get that blur. So the higher your shutter speed, the faster the object needs to be moving. However, the faster the object happens to be moving, the harder it is to keep on target. And there's another problem that we have, which is, let me just show you a sec. Let's take this up. So, right, here's a picture. Doesn't really matter what it is, just focus something up here. Doesn't really matter. All I need you to know is that there's something in the camera. So I'm pointing it at the shelf behind me. Now what happens when I click? Okay, the screen went blank. Just do that again, just to notice that at the point I go click, the screen's gone blank. Okay? What this means is if you are on doing something like half a second and you go click, click, during that half a second you're trying to follow something, your screen has gone blank. You can't actually follow it. And this is true with if you've got a DSLR, the mirror's stuck up on the way. If you've got a mirrorless, it shut the thing off. Now there might be a setting on here so that you can go click and still see. I haven't found the setting yet. If somebody else knows what it is, leave it in the comments. So that also makes panning particularly difficult if you've got a slower speed. All these things in mind means that it's a really tricky thing to do. So you've got to keep practice. Now, what I think has happened here with Janet is there's the second way you can pan. Actually, let's pull back here. Is that just as you can pan from left to right, you can zoom in and out. Okay? And there's a fancy effect. Sometimes you can do this. You can do this quite often. If I take a half-second photo and then zoom in as it's clicking, then what happens is everything kind of blurs forward and back as well as left and right. Okay, so there are various photos. Sometimes you see intentional camera movement or in-camera movement, ICM. People will sometimes go click but zoom in at the same time, and you get some fancy effects with that. Now, when I look at this photo, I can't help but wonder, Janet, whether that's what when we look at this, I can't help but wonder that if that's what you actually did, was at the point, as well as moving left to right and following it, you might, because it's coming round the corner, and so they are coming closer to you, you might well have gone click and been pulling back, zooming back out, as you turn the camera as well. And the kind of giveaway is the way that, if we look in the middle here, you've got kind of left right here, but this here we've kind of got also a bit of smear coming. Now I could be wrong on this. It's extraordinarily difficult to completely backwards engineer these kind of photos because I wasn't there, I didn't know it. I don't have a bunch of cyclists that I can try this out on. But it might be that. So what I would suggest, Janet, is while you're practice these different techniques. When you're out there and you've got the cyclist going past, yes, do your panning left and right, but also do your panning zoom in, zoom out. Try that and see what kind of effect you get with that. And if you're really feeling adventurous, do the panning and the zoom at the same time. Okay, we'll test every moment of your coordination. Your hit rate will be extraordinarily low, but every now and again you might just end up with something absolutely extraordinary. So I hope you find that one useful, Janet. Right, okay. Comments. Oh, Robert said absolutely, so he does want me. So okay, I will give that a little bit of feedback in a minute then. April says creative. Oh, Nick Bass here says, oh, he's late, we'll catch up later. Watch to the end and then you can go back and rewind to the beginning. Janet says the races are in the evening, so usually start by freezing the motion and then trying to start panning as I lose the light. Yeah, that's a good technique. And I have tried the ICM in-camera movement or intentional camera movement on other subjects, but maybe I did it unknowingly this time. Yes, I mean, yeah, and Nick Bath also says it looks like a zoom burst. So yeah, sounds like maybe that's what's kind of happened. Right, okay. What I'm going to also talk about now is Robert's. So some of you may remember last week when we had the Shadows Challenge, Robert put in this image, and it's a great image. It's absolutely, I mean, I really do love this image. It's a really good, strong one. So we've got the skateboarder, and we've got the shadow of the skateboarder rather, and we've got the skateboard flipped in midair, sitting there. And it's a lovely photo. I suggested the idea that you could maybe do it black and white because everything else is grey. But overall, I mean, it's a good one. I mean, you know, this is one quite happily. You quite happily stick into some of the online challenges and competitions and what have you for anything which says shadows or, you know, captured motion or things like that. But what Robert did also was he also sent me his original. And when I looked at the original, we've got this. We've actually got a full-on skateboarder. Let's just open this. So what Robert did was he cropped this bit. But he also has the skateboarder as well. And you know, there's something about this photo which I really, really like. And although, so I suggested to Robert, and he's only just now managed to get back to me, about the idea of there's ways of improving this, because I love the movement in the skateboarder, but essentially our primary problem is with the ground being very bright and quite busy background. I've got to, if I zoom in, we've got a lovely sharp skateboarder here, but he's getting lost. We've not got the full amount of what we really want out of this. And so what I wanted to do was just run through a couple of different options of things that you can do. If you've got Photoshop, it might work with some of the other things like Affinity, I don't know. But what I can talk about is Photoshop at the moment, and some of the ways that it's constantly improving its technology is quite outstanding. So what I want to show you with the skateboarder here. So first of all, let's just crop it in. I'll just bring that in a little bit. It's slightly unbalanced. So we just pull that in there. I've got this little bit down at the bottom. We don't really need that. I'll just drop that up there. Then what we're really looking at is roughly about the same kind of distance below the shadow as we have above the skateboarder. And then left to right a little bit. Actually, I think probably there. Pull this in just a fraction here. So there's a little bit more space, just a touch more space in front of the skateboarder than there is behind, particularly because the arm is stretching out like that. And I think probably as compositions go, that's the one we want to go for. Now, before I get on to what we do with the skateboarder, I'm going to address a couple of other issues. The most distracting thing from this is this bright red car in the background. A couple of options here. We can either use the remove tool to get rid of the car, or we could at the very least desaturate it. Another thing that's kind of distracting as well is this blue sign with the disabled parking thing here. Now, I would say for the sake of this photo, I'd be quite happy to remove that. So I will just take that bit out, something like that, and maybe that little brighter bit down there. So that just removes the distraction away from underneath this arm. Color wise, we just go down here, hue saturation, and what I will do is desaturate, but then turn that to black, fill that all back in, and then turn it back to white, take the paintbrush and just desaturate. I just paint over the red car with it, so that only this bit is really desaturated. A little bit on his trousers there, or pants as you call them on your side of the pond, and we just get rid of that there. Then there's another kind of bright spot there. Let's just go back here and just get rid of the reflection on the headlights, which I feel is also kind of grabbing the attention. Wing mirror there. Okay, so that now has gone from bright red to grey, and it's no longer grabbing our attention. We've also removed the little blue thing. In fact, actually that's now looking slightly there, so we'll perhaps remove that one as well. Okay, so now I feel slightly happier about what's grabbing our attention or what isn't. The next problem that we have is the fact that the skateboarder is just a bit too dark. So again, what I might do, if I select all those, copy it, no, wrong one. Merge all these into, I've just used keyboard shortcuts, but you merge these into one layer above. Then what I might do is, if I go to, there's a one, if I select subject, okay, and this is really, the ability in Photoshop now to select the subject is quite astonishing. It's worked out that it's this person here on the skateboard in the midair who is the subject. It's grabbed that. Now that I've got that, what I could do if I want is say go to something like the curves or the levels. So I go to the curves and I can just brighten him up a bit, something like that. Now, if I wanted, I could put it onto a separate layer and maybe go in and maybe just make sure that the highlights aren't too blown on his shoulder. But if we do something like that, and again, I would be more subtle about it if I was over a bit of time. But now what we have is he's standing out a little bit more against the background. But with all these things, what we've talked before about is what we're trying to say here is what's the key aspect of the photo and what elements are detracting from it. How do we get more attention to go to the point that we want it? And part of the problem is we have a very busy background. Now what I'm going to do, I will just select all that and paste that into a new merged level, because I want to show you the next little trick here. In Camera Raw, in the latest version of Photoshop, they've recently introduced this notion of depth blur. So if I go to Camera Raw filter here, and I go down to Lens Blur, and in Lens Blur I can click Apply. Now the little thing here is going around, it's just waiting for it, and hopefully that will, right, now that's there, I've got a bunch of little extra tools. You may notice that the background's a bit more blurred, but we'll just up it a little bit here, blur amount 50, I'll take that, if I take that up to full blur, you can see everything's gone very blurry, but I think that's overkill, okay? You're always kind of looking to try and keep it as, you want to nudge it along so you're getting as much blur as you can to take the background out, but not to the point whereby it starts to look too unnatural. That's maybe just a touch unnatural, so I'll maybe take that down to sort of round about there. I think that's not a bad amount. Now what's really interesting here as well is this little patch just under here. You'll see it goes white, yellow, purple, deep indigo. And this is the focal range, which is where is it going to be blurry. So now it's automatically selecting this point here. But if I wanted, if I drag this over to the right, what you can see is now the skateboarder is out of focus and the tree behind, well, it's not completely in focus, it is as in focus as the photo was. So it's still that bit of out of focus because it wasn't completely in focus when you took the photo. But the point is that the foreground has now gone out of focus. So depending on where I place this, and if I come fully over to this side, and I can even kind of grab a little and kind of shorten that up, he's now out of focus because the ground really in front is where the focal point is. Now, if I've lost where I am, there's a little thing here where I click there and it's kind of auto grabbing it. So this is auto grabbing the subject in the same way we did subject selection earlier. And it's giving us that blur. So we can boost the blur, we can change the amount of its blur, and we can change whereabouts in the photo it is blurred. And by doing that, now it's kind of separated out that little bit more. So if I just zoom in here a bit and I show without and with, okay, without and with, and you can see that by having a more blurred background, it's allowing him to stand out that little bit more. Now we've got all that. If we want, we can do a final kind of the kind of usual little bits where you might decide that what you're going to do is add just a little bit of vignette, not a lot, just a tiny touch here, and then perhaps light, bring the exposure up, but maybe the highlights down a fraction, shadows up a little bit, or maybe, and then go for the clarity or something like that. Just kind of boosts him and makes him kind of stand out a little bit more. And so from that, if I just group those together, then what we notice is that's your original photo, and that's the photo which is kind of what you were going for. It was the intention. What we were really interested in, well, the narrative of this photo. Now, your original photo, the narrative was the skateboard and the shadow, and that's fine. But for this one, which is including the skateboarder, we need to be able to see the skateboarder and the great kind of intense concentration, look on his face, his eye absolutely eyeing down, eye on the skateboard. Where's he going to land? How's he come up? It's fantastic shape, and this is what we want. This is what we want, and it's only now. It's no longer we're no longer distracted by a busy background, the fact that we can't see him very well, and the fact that there was a bright red car there and these little blue patches of disabled parking. Having got rid of all those bits, I think now we end up with the kind of photo which was, if you like, what was in your head at the point you took it. That's what you were trying to grab when you couldn't pay attention. And at that kind of speed, you can't pay attention to where the red car is sitting in the background or anything else like that. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to show you there, Robert. I hope you found that interesting and useful. So worth remembering that when you get, there are still people I know who are using sort of the old original CD CS6 or something like that for Photoshop, feeling, well, I can do my crops, I can do whatever. Whereas if you are paying the subscription to Creative Cloud, then practically every day or every couple of days, Photoshop is adding something new, is updating something, and some of the new tools available are just absolutely phenomenal. So this depth blur one is one of the latest, and it's really quite amazing what you can do with it. Okay, a couple of comments here. Nick Bath says, very nice photo. Meg says, I really like the diagonal of the skateboard. April says, makes a big difference. Robert says, wow, this is a great new technique. I need to use it on my rugby photos. There are a lot of issues with background. Yes, you probably really could with that. One of the things you do need to be careful, though, is if you are going to be printing these up big, do zoom in and look at the detail. I mean, one of the problems that we sometimes find, if I come back here, I've just done a very quick thing here, but there are sometimes, especially around the hair, it doesn't always work. That's not too bad. There are places where, like here, between the background of the thumb and the knee, it's decided it hasn't counted that. So you would need to kind of go in and, sorry, show you the picture that I'm talking about. So yes, what I'm saying is going in and look at the detail, because it doesn't always select it absolutely perfectly. It looks a bit rough around the fingers. The other thing to notice here, the other thing, really important thing here, is that you've got a certain amount of noise, ISO, the blur is completely smooth. So you would also need to make sure you added in a certain amount of noise in order to match the actual subject. Okay, so if I was to try and do this to get to a point whereby it was print quality worthy, then I would have to be much more detailed about, you see here, bits under the arm here where it hasn't quite got it right. So I would be taking my time to really make sure at each level selection was done before I moved on to the next level, to the next stage. But yes, the fact is you can do that. It just requires a little bit more time. Marilyn says, great photo, and the end result is wonderful. Sandra says, amazing what you can do with Photoshop. Really great process for the skateboarder. And Nadia says, wow. Okay, cool. Hope you found that all useful. Quick little reminder, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Now, okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of the content that I wanted to put across here. So next couple of weeks then, let's just run you through what's going on over the next 2 weeks, or 3 weeks rather. So where are we? Next week then. Next week, right. So Andy had won the Smug Points Challenge for April, and what he was wanting to know was about portraits. So next week I'm going to be talking about portraits. I know we did the self-portrait challenge a few weeks back, but this is more about portraits of other people. I'm going to talk about what is it that actually makes a portrait. You know, I mean, is a passport photo a portrait? Sort of. It's an identification photo, but it doesn't tell you anything about that person beyond the fact of how far, the proportion of their eyes to their nose, or the amount of bald they are, or how wide their chin is compared to the size of their eyebrows. It's an identifier, but it's not really telling you anything about it. There isn't really any real narrative or story to an ID photo. Portrait we tend to think of as something different. So I'm going to talk about that. And that then means, following that, I'm going to be setting a portrait challenge. If that fills you with dread, blame Andy. But I do want you to have a think about it. Tune in next week and watch, and even if you can't tune in next week, watch back within a day or two about what I talk about portraits, because I really feel that it's a worthwhile getting involved in. There will be somebody around that you know that won't mind you taking their photo, whether it's a family member, especially if you have children or grandchildren. Most people have got a friend who's maybe slightly more showy-offy or doesn't really mind. So I'll be talking about portraits. Now, I'll be doing that next week. The challenge will be for 2 weeks after that. So 3 weeks when we come back from, so on the 2nd of June, that will be the portrait challenge. So I will need your images in before that. So try and get them in by the end of May. Now, in between that, on the 26th, there will not be a podcast. In 2 weeks' time is an open studio event called Spring Fling. I'll probably tell you a bit more about that next week. If anybody happens to be in or around Dumfries and Galloway, do come and see me. I'm going to be in a studio space for Saturday, Sunday and Monday, where I will have some of my photos printed up big, stuck on the wall. I'll be doing photography demonstrations, and I'll even have a special offer for visitors to the studio as well. So, but I will talk more about that next week. So, but basically, so for the next 3 weeks, next week I'm talking about portraits. The week after, there won't be a podcast because I'll be doing spring fling. And the week after that, we'll be coming back and I will be looking forward to your entries into the portrait challenge. Okay? So that's where we're at. Now, I will also say, because I'm doing portraits next week, chances are I probably also have room for 1 or 2 slots for feedback as well. So if you're wanting to get an extra 25 Smug points, both Janet and Robert will get an extra 25 Smug points for today for putting in images for which we're getting feedback. And you can work your way up the Smug point leaderboard. Okay, I think that's pretty much about it. Thank you ever so much to Janet and Robert for giving us the images to give feedback on. I hope you've all learned something from that. And to go back to this idea of the observational exercise. Take your phone, use your phone, take photos, but also this idea of set up an Instagram account or something similar, because then I think the idea of going through what you've got, curating it, and find something which you want to put on there, so that when you go back, it's not really for anybody else out there, but somebody else might look at it. But that combination of observation, but also curation of your own work, and if you're doing that every day, or at least a few times a week, I think it's going to help. It is going to help. You can try out all these different techniques of diagonals, of symmetry, of asymmetry, of rule of thirds, of leading lines, all this kind of stuff that we talk about, but also narrative. What's the interesting bit? What's the interesting bit that's grabbing your attention here? And how do you communicate that with your camera, or really here with your phone? If you would like to meet up, or just connect up, the Kim Ayres phone pics further back in the chat line here, or if you want to message me, I can send you a link, and link to mine, tell me about yours, and I'll happily link back to you as well. Right, I think that's pretty much it. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye bye. Nope, not that one. I keep getting this wrong.